You don't live by values. You live by reactions. Smile when they smile. Flinch when they frown. Speak when it's safe. Stay silent when it's not. And you think that's virtue, but it's just reflex. A system trained you to behave, not to lead, not to stand, just to comply. You learned to be liked, to be easy, to be acceptable, because every reward you ever received was for fitting in, not for being real. So here's the truth. You don't fear being wrong. You fear being rejected. But what happens when being right earns no applause? What happens when your truth offends the room? Will you still say it? Will you still live it? Will you still hold the line when no one claps? That's where internal law begins. In silence, in rejection, in clarity that doesn't flinch. Because until you write your own law, you're just a character in someone else's script. Predictable, performative, replaceable. Let's change that. You were rewarded for obedience, not awareness, not clarity, not truth. As a child, you were trained. Sit still, get praise. Say what they like, get love. Swallow your discomfort, get approval. And it worked. So you adapted. You became good. Not because it was right, but because it was safe. Now you call it personality, but it's programming. Every smile, every apology, every delayed no, you turn into a yes. It's a survival strategy disguised as character. You don't live by conviction. You live by cues. When they lean in, you soften. When they frown, you shrink. When they approve, you breathe again. That's not morality. That's codependency with applause. Example: you're exhausted, but say yes to one more favor. Why? Because being seen as helpful feels more important than being honest. Another: you disagree in a meeting, but stay silent. Not because you respect the speaker, but because you fear the fallout. This is how it happens. Bit by bit, you trade truth for peace, voice for belonging, self for image. And the system loves it because now you're manageable, predictable, controllable. But here's the consequence. Every time you betray your internal law, you weaken it. You become quieter in your own life, until you don't even recognize what you really believe, only what gets rewarded. So ask yourself, if you stopped being praised for your goodness, would you still live it? If not, you don't have values. You have triggers. Let's uncover what they've buried. You weren't born weak. You were made compliant. One small compromise at a time, until it became a personality. You smile when uncomfortable. You nod when you disagree. You over-explain your silence just to avoid looking rude. But here's the truth, that's not you. That's a role you learned to play, to keep their love, to avoid their judgment, to survive their rules. And now you've forgotten where the performance ends and where you begin. This is what happens when external rule becomes identity. It's not just about what you do, it's about who you think you are. You confuse comfort with safety, people-pleasing with kindness, approval with direction. Example: a man thinks he's humble, but in reality he's terrified of being seen as arrogant, so he underplays everything he does. That's not humility, That's fear with good branding. Another. A woman believes she's a peacekeeper, but really, she's addicted to being liked. So she avoids every conflict, no matter how necessary. That's not diplomacy. That's erasure. You were never taught to define yourself, only to defend the version they could accept. But if your sense of self only survives when others agree with it, it's not a self. It's a mirror, and mirrors can be shattered, replaced, reprogrammed. You want to reclaim your identity. You can't start with what feels good. You start with what's true, even if it costs you attention, even if it gets misread, even if it means standing alone. Because that's what internal law is. It's the version of you that remains when every external rule collapses. Let's build that version, because the moment you stop echoing, they lose control. And in that silence, something terrifying happens. You become unreadable, and unreadable is untouchable. You don't need more confidence. You need a code, something that doesn't flinch under pressure, something you can return to when the world misreads you, ignores you, rejects you. That's what internal law is. Not a list of affirmations, not fake stoicism, but a forged standard built in silence, tempered by loss, held without needing applause. It starts with one question: what do I believe is right, even when it costs me everything? And then you test it. In discomfort, in chaos, in misunderstanding. Example: you believe in honesty. So when someone you care about asks a hard question, you tell them the truth. They don't like it. They pull away. You hold your line anyway. That's law. Or this. You say no to a project that doesn't align with your principles. The money's good. The opportunity is tempting. But your code says, don't sell out for short-term gain. You decline. Not because it's easy, but because it's clean. Most people outsource their morality. They check the crowd, the algorithm, the climate. But when you write internal law, you become untouchable. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to defend your boundary. Your silence becomes self-respect. 3 signals. You're living by internal law. You feel peace even when misunderstood. You act consistently in private and in public. You stop chasing praise because clarity is enough. And here's the power move. When you live by internal law, you don't become rigid. You become anchored. You can bend without breaking, adapt without abandoning yourself, speak with fewer words, but greater gravity. You don't glow. You ground. Your presence changes the tempo of the room, not because it demands attention, but because it carries something unshakable. Let's go further. Let's weaponize presence itself. When your law comes from within, they can't move you. Not with silence, not with flattery, not with shame, because their power relies on your reaction. And when that reaction never comes, the system collapses. This is psychological immunity, not numbness, not apathy, but intentional detachment from external control. You don't chase applause. You don't flinch at criticism. You don't explain your no. You hold. That's what rattles them. Example: someone tries to provoke you publicly. They want the show, the outburst, the proof they still own. A piece of you. You give them nothing. Just presence. Unshaken. Unreadable. They don't know what to do with that. Or this. You succeed quietly. No big announcement. No need to be seen. Because your validation doesn't come from visibility. It comes from alignment. And alignment is rare. Because most people live in reaction. Their moods change with the comments. Their beliefs fold under pressure. Their values depend on who's watching. Not you. Because internal law is your compass. Not the crowd. Not the calendar. Not the culture. You wake up with clarity. You act from design. You no longer wait for permission to be solid. That's presence. Not loud. Not performative. But dense. Grounded. Unshakable. And in a world full of noise, stillness becomes power. Silence becomes control. Detachment becomes dominance. Let's close this. You can be liked, or you can be governed. But you can't be both, because every time you chase approval, you lose authorship over your time, over your voice, over your code. You become editable, sharpened down, rewritten by opinion, and soon you're not even living your life. You're acting in a role written by people you'll never meet and values you never questioned. But there's another way, one where silence is your ally, principle is your spine, and approval is irrelevant. It starts now. You don't need anyone's permission to be solid. You just need the courage to stop checking if they're clapping. So, here's your task. Name one law you will follow, even if it isolates you. Say no without explaining it. Do something right and tell no one. Because real sovereignty doesn't announce itself. It just lives. Fully. Quietly. Uncompromised. So the question is no longer, what do they think of you? The real question is, have you become someone even you would follow? Write the law. Live it. And never look back. This path isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks. It's just one law, held again and again, until the noise of the world no longer edits your spine.